Greetings, my fellow freedom loving sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning in to L3 Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful realms of planet Earth. Today's date is Sunday, November 2nd, 2025. This is episode 1914. Shutdown proves America's dangerous dependence and the foreign policy of Washington and Jefferson. Before I proceed, you can follow me on multiple social media sites and podcast channels. Just type in Look Your Luck number 3, Look Your Luck Roman number 3 with 3 eyes, or the Look Your Luck Roman number 3 podcast. Furthermore, if you have any questions, comments, recommendations, all that good stuff, whatever you do, please use the quorum. Hit me via email to ll3.podcast@proton.me if you want to donate, go to PayPal.me or Cash Out at /Look number 3. And I will try to get the Steam account up and running ASAP. All right, well, this one here just got my attention once again. I know I did an episode earlier today. What was funny about that last one I've done, it was a big error with I did a live feed and the audio signal was very horrible, so I actually had to scrap it. However, I just improvised and just had to redo it, make sure I'm rested up. Oh yeah, we had daylight savings time today. Move your clock an hour back, so people be complaining, oh my God, it'll be 5:30, the sun will set. Oh well, that's how it goes. Well, I'm going to read this here from the Liberty Conservative News.substack.com. The shutdown proves America's dangerous dependence on D.C. Millions of Americans discover what dependence on D.C. really means. And as it reads here, millions of low-income Americans woke up this week to discover that their SNAP Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits, better known as food stamps, are about to stop flowing. The reason? The ongoing federal government shutdown has frozen funding for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which administered the $120 billion a year food subsidy, unless Congress acts immediately. November 1st marks the first day in decades when SNAP recipients could see their benefits vanish. But the crisis has revealed something deeper than a budget fight, a nation dangerously dependent on Washington for survival. It's heartbreaking, but it's also telling, said Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky. When a single budget dispute can stop people from buying food, we're not just facing a fiscal problem, we're facing a freedom problem. How the shutdown froze the food chain. According to the USDA's own memo, the agency cannot guarantee SNAP payments for the 42 million Americans who rely on the program each month. Federal employees who process benefits have been furloughed, and the reserve funds used to bridge temporary shutdowns have run dry. Even the Women, Infants, and Children WIC nutrition program, which provides baby formula and groceries for mothers, has warned it will begin shutting down distribution centers this week. In a political back and forth, Democrats blame Donald Trump for refusing to approve a funding deal that maintains social spending programs, while Republicans argue Democrats are holding the government hostage over unrelated ideological demands. They're funding gender ideology and foreign climate schemes, but not food for Americans, said Marjorie Taylor Greene, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican from Georgia. This is what happens when Washington's priorities are backwards. And don't get me wrong, I'll say this again. I'm not going to blame President Trump, and I am not a disciple of the individual. Article 1, Section 7 of the Florida Constitution. Don't say anything to defend that claim about it's Trump's fault. Read the damn law. Come back, we'll talk. I'll continue on. Dependency by design. The shutdown has thrown into stark relief of fragility, of centralized welfare system. SNAP is 100% federally funded, meaning states have no control over the flow of dollars or the rules governing eligibility. When Washington stops paying, the entire safety net collapses. Critics say this dependency isn't accidental, it's strategic. The federal government wants states and citizens dependent, says Heritage Foundation economist E.J. Antoni, because dependency means control. You can't stand up to the hand that feeds you. In contrast, states like Florida and New York are exploring state-level contingency programs to keep food distribution running independently of federal funding. Florida Agriculture Commissioner Wilton Simpson said the state should never again allow its citizens' food supply to be dictated by D.C. dysfunction. The shutdown proves that when Washington sneezes, the rest of America starves, Simpson said. That's not a sustainable system. The political blame game. As usual, both parties are weaponizing the crisis. The White House claims Republicans are playing politics with people's groceries, while the GOP argues Democrats refuse to prioritize basic programs in negotiations, instead pushing for climate funding, foreign aid, and progressive social initiatives. The U.S. Department of Agriculture confirmed to The Sun that it had warned Congress 2 weeks ago of the November 1st cutoff date, and that no further stopgap funds remain. Meanwhile, People.com reported that millions of families are already flooding state call centers to ask when their next payment will come, overwhelming the system. They've known this was coming for weeks, said Representative Andy Biggs, Republican from Arizona, yet Democrats would rather point fingers than fix the problem. They care more about the narrative than the people. A symptom of a bigger problem. The shutdown isn't the root cause. It's the symptom. The real issue is that Washington has centralized essential services that used to be handled close to home, leaving citizens powerless when political gridlock strikes. SNAP's very structure makes independence impossible. States can't supplement it, communities can't control it, and recipients can rely on it when the federal bureaucracy breaks down. If your livelihood depends on whether Congress can get along, you don't live in a free country, said former Representative Tulsi Gabbard, who has been critical of both parties handling welfare and spending. Real resilience means communities helping themselves, not begging Washington for permission to eat. Liberty and the limits of compassion. For decades, Americans have been told that compassion requires centralization, that only Washington can ensure fairness, equality, and stability. But the shutdown exposes the opposite. The larger and more distant government becomes, the less capable of its meeting basic needs when crisis hits. Local churches, charities, and state programs are now scrambling to fill the gap, proving that civil society, not bureaucracy, is the real engine of compassion. This is what happens when the federal government inserts itself into every corner of life, said Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah. A government big enough to feed you is big enough to starve you. The Liberty lesson. America's founders never envisioned a society where millions relied on Washington to eat. They built a federal system, decentralized governance, precisely to prevent this kind of nation paralysis. The SNAP shutdown isn't just a policy failure, it's a warning about what happens when dependency replaces self-governance. We can't call ourselves free if our food supply depends on the next continuing resolution, said Rand Paul. Real security comes from independence, not bureaucracy. Conclusion, Washington's compassion crisis. For now, Congress is scrambling to patch the problem with emergency funds, a temporary fix for a permanent flaw. But Liberty advocates argue that until Americans reclaim local control over welfare, food systems, and community aid, the next shutdown will bring the same suffering all over again. When food security depends on D.C., liberty isn't just fragile, it's already gone. This is what you get, folks, when you rely on the federal government to try to take care of you. That simple. And there's some good folks out there that probably do need it more than others. But one thing I despise, when you have DC knows best, it turns to manure, just like government. However, at least if we do it on a local level, maybe sometimes the state level, it would be better than the District of Criminals. That's why in my past episode, I support the Victory Garden movement, Victory Garden Alliance. People need to start to learn to grow their own food, including yours truly. I'm ready to do it myself because I want to do this for a very long time. And one thing I can tell people, when we start being more self-reliant and helping our neighbors in a good way, respect one another, we could all spiritually prosper. We don't need D.C. to solve all our problems. We could do it on our own backyard. Think and act locally. Federalism is the key, my friends. D.C. is a disease. All right. So, I'll do one more here. This one here came from 10th Amendment Center. Michael Bolden. This is an old one. It came out June 24th, 2024. Free and independent, the foreign policy of Washington and Jefferson. This is what Mr. Bolden has to say. The anxious to preserve their hard-won independence, Presidents George Washington and Thomas Jefferson championed a foreign policy centered on avoiding entangling alliances. They envisioned America pursuing peace, trade, with friendship with all nations, but beholden to none. A major theme of George Washington's farewell address was foreign policy. He advised that the United States should take advantage of its political and geographic situation, a massive physical separation from the old countries, to pursue a truly independent course. You can see the same line thinking in a letter Washington sent to Alexander Hamilton just 4 months before his address. But we are to be told by foreign power, what shall we do? We shall do, and what shall we not do? We have independence yet to seek, and have contended hitherto for a very little. As someone who lived through the Revolution and the war against what is at the time the largest empire on earth, this view from George Washington reiterated core principles of sovereignty and independence that came straight from the Declaration of Independence. To assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and the nature's God entitle them. In other words, if a country remains separate from other nations and equal to them, it is truly independent and can chart its own path despite geopolitical changes. The states declared their independence as free and independent states. That means, in the word of the Declaration itself, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. Washington emphasized this view in his farewell address, with a predominant motive has been to endeavor to gain time to our country to settle and mature, and it is recent institutions, and to progress without interruption to the degree of strength and consistency which is necessary to give it, humanly speak, the command of its own fortunes. There's an element of equality in treatment and reciprocity with other nations throughout Washington's foreign policy advice. This was also based on a foundational principle expressed in the Declaration. In effect, exercise the authority to do all acts and things which independent states may of right do, implies that other nations have the same claim to the status. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. In other words, America's founding principles demand a policy of respecting the sovereignty of other nations. Thomas Jefferson put this principle into practice in a letter to Pasha of Tripoli discussing his dispatch of the squadron to the Mediterranean. We have yet given them in strict command to conduct themselves towards all friendly powers with the most perfect and respect and good order, it being the first object of our solicitude to cherish peace and friendship with all nations with whom it can be held on terms of equality and reciprocity. We'll cover Jefferson's foreign policy views more deeply later in the article, but it wasn't enough to simply respect the sovereignty of other nations. The U.S. had to determine how it would interact with them. Washington warned the danger of foreign influence. Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of free people ought to be constantly awake. since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. And there's some things that we could have examples of, but I'll continue on. Washington went on to argue that avoiding foreign influence and acting with impartiality go hand in hand. He pointed out that for jealousy of a free people to be useful, it has to remain impartial. If not, it becomes the instrument of the very influence to be avoided instead of a defense against it. As Washington went on to explain, both favoring or disdaining another nation creates problems. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those whom they actuate, to see danger only on one side and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. It follows that real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favor are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interests. That brings us to Washington warnings against permanent alliances. True and independence are and guarding against the insidious wiles of foreign influence requires a rejection of what he called a habitual hatred or habitual fondness towards any other nation. In the execution of such a plan, nothing is more essential than that permanent, inveterate, antipathies against particular nations and passionate attachment for others should be excluded, and that in place of them, just and amicable feelings towards all should be cultivated. Washington minced no words. The nation which indulges towards another a habitual hatred or a habitual fondness is in some degree a slave. It is a slave to its animosity or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duty and its interest. Washington's warnings about how permanent, inveterate antipathies against particular nations would play out seem almost prophetic today. Antipathy and in one nation against another disposes each more readily to offer insult and injury, to lay hold of slight causes of umbrage, and to be haughty and intractable when accidental or trifle occasions of dispute occur. Hence, frequent collisions, obstinate, envenomed, and bloody contests. The nation, prompt by ill will and resentment, sometimes impels to war the government, contrary to the best calculations of policy. Failure to heed this warning has destroyed the peace and sometimes, as Washington warned, the liberty of many nations. That's why Washington wanted a foreign policy of peace on the terms of equality and reciprocity. Observe good faith and justice towards all nations, cultivate peace and harmony with all. But Washington's foreign policy strategy didn't stop at guarding against a habitual hatred for particular nations. He also warned of the evils of habitual fondness, a special treatment for the favorite nation. Again, his warnings were prophetic. So likewise, a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one of the enmities of the other betrays the former into a participation in the quarrels and war of the latter without adequate inducement or justification. The nation doesn't end, the danger doesn't end there. It leads also to concessions, to the favorite nation of privileges denied to others, which is apt doubly to injure the nation, making the concessions by unnecessarily parting with what ought to have been retained, and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and a disposition to retaliate in the parties from whom equal privileges are withheld. Washington hammered home the dangers of passionate attachment of one nation for another. His description of the consequences sounds like a perfect description of many politicians and lobbyists today. It gives to ambitions corrupt or deluded citizens who devote themselves to the favorite nation facility to betray or sacrifice the interests of their own country without odium, sometimes even with popularity, gliding with the appearances of a virtuous sense of obligation, a commendable difference for public opinion, or a laudable zeal for public good, the base or foolish compliances of ambition, corruption, and or infatuation. Washington said these attachments create avenues to foreign influence and innumerable ways. This should alarm the truly enlightened and independent patriot. How many opportunities do they afford to tamper with domestic factions, to practice the arts of seduction, to mislead public opinion, to influence the public councils? Such an attachment of a small or weak towards a great and powerful nation dooms the former to be the satellite of the latter. So instead of constant political and military engagement, instead of habitual hatred or fondness for other nations, George Washington told us to handle foreign policy like this. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So, in other words, trades. Even while pursuing a foreign policy that leads with commerce rather than politics or military might, Washington still advised equality and reciprocity. Sorry about that. Reciprocity. But even our commercial policy should hold an equal and impartial hand, neither seeking nor granting exclusive favors or preferences, consulting the nature course of things, diffusing and diversifying a general means the streams of commerce, but foreseeing nothing. He went on to say, there can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. It is an illusion which experience must cure, which just a pride ought to discard. Thomas Jefferson was certainly inspired by George Washington's farewell address. Years later, he and James Madison recommended the speech as one of the 6 essential resources to understand the general principles of liberty and the rights of man and nature in society. More specifically, you can see George Washington's foreign policy influenced in Thomas Jefferson's first inaugural address as he summarized the foreign policy of his administration. It was clearly built on the foundation Washington laid: peace and commerce and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Jefferson put this restrained policy into action in his approach to the Barbary pirates. Washington and Jefferson's policies shouldn't be construed as advocates of the United States renege our current agreements. Instead, the U.S. should fulfill them, but then end them as soon as possible. Washington put it this way: Let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing entanglements. I hold the maxim, no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense, but in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them. Jefferson agreed. He advised that the path forward away from entangling alliances is to disentangle. Let our affairs be disentangled from those of all other nations, except as to commerce, which the merchants will manage be better the more they are left free to manage. Ultimately, Thomas Jefferson summed up this original American foreign policy best: commerce with all nations, alliance with none should be our motto. Absolutely, and this is why I always tell people they want, like, when you got some foreign elected official, foreign official coming in, which all like give him a standing ovation, or her. It's pathetic and ridiculous, trying to tell us how to live, think. We need their help. If not, they'll call us names or tell us what should we do to sacrifice our natural rights. We got that too. I'll give you a couple names on that angle. You got a bunch of douchebags in D.C. applauding for both these clowns. That's just one example. John Jay did warn us about this as well in Federalist Papers 2 through 5. This is why I always tell people, trade with none and foreign entanglements with none. Trade with all. Excuse me. I always believe in that view. If you don't learn from the past, my friends, we're damn to repeat it. It's happening right now in front of our eyes. The whole thing of Lacanianism. And you can say Donald Trump is just a symptom, not the disease. Because they've all been doing it. Whether Democrat or Republican, Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, George Herbert Walker Bush, Lyndon Johnson, even John F. Kennedy made those mistakes in the past, but he's trying to revive himself. It goes on and on and on. Lacanianism is a disease. Centralization, foreign entanglements. We got to stop playing the game of dictating to everybody else how should we live. That's far damn ludicrous. That's the lesson from the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, etc. If we don't learn from the past, my friends, we're damn to repeat it. That's why I commended the foreign policies of Jefferson and Washington. Well, that will be it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, recommendations, all that good stuff, whatever you do, please use the decorum. Hit me via email to ll3.podcast@proton.me. I will leave the footnotes of these articles on this episode. If you want to donate, go to PayPal.me or Cash App /local number 3. If you want to support the Liberty News conservative news and the 10th Amendment Center, that'd be awesome. Good stuff. Observe responsibly and spread it throughout your social media networks. I know I repeat myself. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love. May your guardian spirits be with you.